I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
And I'm Ahmed Baba.
And welcome to this session of Shrinking Trump. Our show has been dedicated to looking at the politics and the psychopathology of Donald Trump, how it affects his functioning, how it affects his decisions. And we've been looking at him from really two perspectives. First, from his malignant narcissism. That is a severe narcissistic personality disorder, which results in Trump's lack of empathy for others, his compulsive lying, his criminal behavior. But more recently, in the past few years, John Gartner, who's really known for beginning the movement Duty to Warn, has been talking about Trump's incipient dementia. That is, we're starting to see some of the early signs of cognitive dissolution on Trump's part. So we've been noting that and chronicling it and also talking about the news of the week, and we've been doing it. This is our 66th episode. But this week is the first time we have a guest co-host, which is very exciting. And it's because John is on assignment. He's been doing some work for the show and needed a week off. And so Ahmed Baba, who is the founder of the best-selling Substack newsletter, AhmedBaba.News. He's also has been a columnist at The Independent. He also is really an expert on Project 2025 and was warning all of us during the election about what Trump might do if he won. And he's been doing all those things, right, Ahmed?
Oh, he sure
and,
has.
And lastly, Ahmed makes appearances on CNN. His work has been quoted in the major newspapers. He's also made many appearances on MS Now, formerly MSNBC. And I like to say we're really pleased to have him before he becomes too famous and won't have the time to visit us. But in any case, wonderful to have you, Ahmed.
I will always have the time. And I'll also keep calling it MSNBC, even if they change it to MS Now, just like I still dead name Twitter. It's Twitter. It's not X. It'll always be the thing that we want it to be. But I'm just happy to be here, an honor to be a guest host. I got big shoes to fill with John, but I'm here. I'm excited to get in the weeds here, and I love your audience, and I love talking to you guys. So I was happy when you hit me up.
Terrific. And you don't have to sing.
Yeah, no, I don't. No, I don't. I can rap potentially. If I had been maybe forewarned, I could have put together a rap for that, but I can't. My vocals aren't at that level.
I think whatever level they are, they'll be at a higher level than John's.
He's got something there. I think he's got something there.
Yes, as did Jerry Lewis. But in any case, we're going to move forward. We want to begin with Trump's numbers. We've been talking about this for several weeks, and we have been starting to see Trump falling below 40%, and not just for general approval, but also on issues that are important to him, such as the economy and immigration. So and I sort of went over our media list, and we wanted to start with this one by the redoubtable Harry Enton from CNN, talking about tariffs and Trump's base.
I never viewed tariffs as popular with Americans, but at least for Trump's base and supporters, at one point, they were really giving him the benefit of the doubt here.
Yeah, they really were, Bianna. And I will note, it was not just the base. It was the overall American public. And they have turned against tariffs the same way college football pundits have turned against Arch Manning after his performance in Columbus on Saturday. Look at this. New tariffs on imported goods. You go back to November of 2024. Look, the popular position was favor. They favored new tariffs on imported goods, 52%, 48% opposed. You go to this side of the ledger, look at that, the opposition up like a rocket. We're talking about 60% opposing new tariffs compared to just 40% in favor. So it was majority favor back when Trump was reelected in November of 2024. Now it's a clear 3 in 5 Americans oppose it. The Americans have gotten a taste of the tariffs, and they spit it right out.
So is the taste paying more? I mean, because that's how economists have always described this, as actually a tax on consumers.
Yes, it's exactly right. Why is the opposition up like a rocket? Well, it all comes down to money out of the pocketbook, right? Impact of tariffs on prices. Look at this in the short term. 77% of Americans now agree they raise prices in the short term. Look at this itty bitty number at the bottom. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. When you can count it on your own hand, you know it's a small percentage. Just 4% of Americans believe that in the short term, tariffs decrease prices. Long term, look, this has long been the Donald Trump argument, right? That even if they're short term pain, in the long term will pay off. Not according to Americans. Impact of tariffs on prices, even over the long term, look at that. 50% say increase. Just 25%, just half the level, say decrease. And while 25% in this particular case is better than 4%, 25% is way less than 50% of Americans who say that, in fact, prices will increase over the long term because of tariffs.
Can you do me a favor and go find who the 4% are?
I will go ahead.
I'm
I will
stunned
do
that
some
there's even
on-the-street
4% of
reporting.
Americans.
I'm sure I can go out to Times Square and see what I can find out there.
Okay, but in all seriousness, from the tariff policy to the trade policy, how is it impacting Trump's overall approval?
Right, okay. If this was happening in a bubble, right, and it was, okay, I don't like tariffs, but it isn't impacting my overall view of Trump, I think Trump would be like, forget about it, doesn't matter. But this is why the political implications are so important, because Fox News literally asked, what's the top reason that Trump's doing a bad job? What ranks as number one? The economy, and tariffs ranks as number one. The number one reason why those who disapprove of Trump think he's doing a bad job, it comes right back to tariffs. The bottom line is this: when prices go up, presidential approval ratings go down, and that's exactly what we are seeing in the polling
Perhaps
data.
this was the deflection that Ron Brownstein was talking about in a segment in the last hour about the increase in these ICE raids, because they're deflecting from something the president is not happy about.
That's often something that Donald Trump will do, is if he sees something he doesn't like, he's going to go in the other direction and try and bring the American mindset with him.
Yeah, what do you think?
I mean, my take was going to be the deflection piece at the end, but it seems they got it baked in there. I mean, right now we see his polling being dragged down everywhere, and they didn't really get to the specifics of where his approvals are right now. But like you said, they're below 40. The end of July, Gallup had him at 37%, which was 3 points away from his all-time low of 34%, which was just days after January 6th, right? So like, he is really near a political low right now. And that is where all of this acting out is coming from. That's where these power grabs are coming from. He's feeling agitated, cornered. This combined with the Epstein files is really getting under his skin and making him act increasingly erratic.
I agree. You know, he gets desperate, and he's very good at changing the topic. But the American public are not letting go of their experience of these high prices, and they're getting worse.
Yeah, exactly. And he just oversaw the worst 3 months of job growth since the pandemic. Those revisions, we're going to have new BLS numbers here in a moment. And it's just, the American people are being hit right now. They can see through this. They can, just like we couldn't convince the American people that the economy was great in the 2024 election, he's not going to be able to convince people that they aren't feeling the impacts of increased prices at the grocery store, or that Medicaid is is being cut and going to be pulled out from under them, or the Obamacare subsidies that are about to expire. All of these material impacts are coming down on the American people. And meanwhile, they're seeing him do wild stuff like deploying military to the streets. It's not boding well for him. And I think he's turning the American people away from him.
Yeah. And you know, he really won by adding young people, African Americans and Latinos to his coalition, maybe grudgingly in some cases, but they voted for him. And we're seeing that change, aren't we?
Yeah, it's been a complete erosion. You know, he made a bunch of gains among Black voters. I'm not one of them, if anyone's wondering. I don't know if it's a mystery or not. I'm not really a big fan, but somehow he made some gains among Black Americans. The numbers are interesting because it said 83% supported him, which was an increase, right? Normally, or 83% opposed him, not supported him, which was an increase from before, right? Previously, I think it was doubled, right? 15% supported him in 2024. Previous year, only around 7 or 8%. according to the Pew Research Center.
That's right.
And so what we're seeing is he doubled black support, and then now he's erased those gains. So if we look at the polling from when he took office, we're seeing a reduction, a total reduction. And now I think it was the Economist YouGov saw net approval rating. I dropped an article on this, down 30% between May and mid-August. And now his disapproval among Black Americans is at 87%, which is 2 points higher than the amount that rejected him in 2024.
I'm so glad that's returned. And look, I mean, he's attacking blue cities with African American populations. Not that he's actually doing anything constructive, but he's flexing his muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And Latinos are also cratering. They weren't voting for these ICE raids, which are really set up like a secret police that's grabbing people off the street and breaking up families and trying to send kids to Guatemala. I mean, it's been really a nightmare for Latinos, it seems to me.
Yeah, I mean, he promised he's going to go after the criminals, but at the same time, he was generalizing all migrants as criminals that poison the blood. So now we're seeing that in action. We're seeing people who are innocent, people who are actually showing up to their court proceedings, right? They're trying to follow the rules, getting picked up by ICE. And that is what is eroding his Latino support. Because, I mean, that's what you're seeing too, right? It's like, it's a backfiring effect of him doing exactly what, you and I have been predicting, right? But for some reason he had sold the people that he would have a more reasonable policy approach, but Americans are grappling with the reality of their decision and it's backfiring.
No, it really is buyer's remorse. But the media isn't quite covering it. I mean, we just saw Harry Enton doing a really nice job on CNN, but do you see a reluctance?
It's just weird with Trump because, like, back in the Biden era, remember when he was polling similarly? He was polling low, and we'd have weeks-long news cycles about how unpopular Biden was. Mm-hmm. And, like, the main obsession was just trying to figure out why Biden was unpopular, right? And that was, like, what we would talk about for weeks. And it's like Donald is historically unpopular right now, doing insanely authoritarian things, and yet it doesn't get brought up often in discussion. Whenever I go on, I try to like bring it up, or every time I go on, like, he's really unpopular, guys. He's actually disliked profoundly. And I think it's because he's doing these projections of strength, that like offsets, he's asserting powers he does not have, which we'll get into later. And that I think is working to deflect from his profound weaknesses that he has. Mm-hmm. He is politically toxic. And Republicans are down in every generic ballot poll we see. Black unemployment's at 7.2%. We have the slowing job growths. I mean, we'll see what happens in this news report, but he's toxic, man. And he's toxic for the Republican Party.
And we really did see this during his first term. By the time we got to COVID, when he was on television every day, he was losing support terribly. No one believed what he was saying about the pandemic, although there's more revisionist history we'll get to a little bit later with RFK Jr. One of the things that really appalls me, and maybe it's because I did grow up in a time when you could trust statistics, and to be fair, there was a time when polling was much more accurate. Before cell phones. I mean, I remember when there were landlines and polls would really predict election results within like 2 points. And that's been gone since 2000, I think.
Yeah.
But in this administration, to have the press secretary come out and lie about his poll numbers, I saw this on Instagram and I just couldn't resist showing it because I've watched it almost every day. It makes me laugh. So here are two Instagram singers reacting to Caroline and her press report on Trump's popularity.
According to brand new polling from the Daily Mail, President Trump has never been more popular as his approval ratings are reaching historic highs.
Bitch, what the fuck? Bitch, what the fuck? Bitch, bitch, what the fuck? Bitch, what the fuck? Bitch, what the fuck? What the fuck?
That was my first time watching it all the way through. I didn't, so I know it just kept going and going. It's great. It's accurate. It's an accurate reaction.
It is. It's Mozart of all things. I think it's Mozart. It's so good. Thank you for indulging me. As I said, I watch it every day.
That's an excellent use of free will for to decide to do that, to use your singing talents for that. I mean, we need this.
We do. John Gartner's listening. Don't let that be an encouragement.
I would love to see his rendition of that, to be honest. That would be, maybe when he comes back, you two can reenact that. That would be great for me.
Dude, it's just John. The next clip we wanted to show you, well, we should really talk about the Epstein debacle and what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, just like, Caroline, there's denying reality. That's the same thing happening with Trump. Like, we saw just a bunch of the victims, like, finally stepping forward in a real powerful, resounding group way. They were out on Capitol Hill in a press conference, just talking about how this is not a hoax. This is not a Democratic hoax, right? This is actually real abuse that happened. They broke down what had happened to them. They talked about how Epstein had bragged that Trump was his friend, one of them had mentioned, and they were really getting into details. And then minutes after the presser ended, Trump is in the Oval Office talking about how it's a Democratic hoax.
And it really is strikingly tone deaf, isn't it?
It's also just dumb by Trump standards. We were talking about this, last night. Like, this is just, it's really belittling his supporters' intelligence to the point where it's like he's kind of lost a step in his like conspiracy theories,
Yeah, it's on the one hand, it's political malpractice. I mean, it really is the wrong thing to do, and clearly he's not listening to any advice. But it also makes me think of his cognitive decline, because he's only been saying this now whenever asked about Epstein. He blamed Obama for it, even though Epstein was prosecuted during his term. I mean, it doesn't make any sense politically or even cognitively. I mean, what does it mean that it's a Democratic hoax? Whether it was made up?
It's like he's cycling through his greatest hit. It's like he, at this point, is becoming a caricature of himself, where he's not. I can't speak to his cognitive condition. I don't, I can't treat him. You're the one that's a professional. You can see more of what's going on, but I can see from an outside observer's perspective, who's a non-professional, that homeboy has lost many steps since the first term, and he is not as sharp as he once was, especially politically. And I don't know if that's because he doesn't care anymore, and because he thinks he has no more elections to run. But that comment, when he knows his base, he's the one that he created this. His movement, like, there's very real abuse with Epstein, but he was the one, and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and the people that filled his administration were the ones that promised explicitly that there was a list, an Epstein list, that would take down every Democratic operative on earth, and that every Democrat you hate was a part of this thing, and they're all going to be taken down because they're this cabal, right? And then it somewhere along the way, it kind of melded with QAnon adjacent stuff with this big pedophile cabal stuff. But nonetheless, it was a promise. And Trump says, I'm going to release this. He comes into office and then says it's a Democratic code. Like, no one Not a single soul buys that.
Pam Bondi said there was a list on her desk.
Right?
Right. I mean, it's really something happened. And I do think they discovered that his name was all over those files.
Yeah. And we know, or at least according to the Wall Street Journal, reportedly, allegedly, save us from getting attacked there. Allegedly, Pam Bondi was in the White House and told Trump that his name was in the files. And that seems to have spooked him. Ever since then, he's been acting not that he was stable before, but he's been acting increasingly unstable. And this is how he behaves when he has something to hide. And I don't know if it's exclusively Epstein files that he's worried about, if there's other things going on with him, but he is acting like a cornered Donald.
Yeah, he certainly is. We're going to show you just a bit of this. Nicole Wallace did a really nice job yesterday showing the juxtaposition of the survivors of Epstein and Maxwell outside the Capitol, and then Trump's response inside the White House.
A stark split-screen moment unfolded today in the nation's capital. It was a clarion call for transparency from the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and it was set against Donald Trump and the Trump administration, whose efforts at providing clarity in the Epstein case have been disingenuous at best. They spoke today. It was part of a public push to have all of the Epstein materials and files released. The petition that would make that happen, that would trigger a vote in Congress on the bill releasing the Epstein files, at this point just needs the support of 2 more Republicans. Here's what the survivors had to say about that.
It's time for us to see beyond the curtain. Why was Jeffrey Epstein so protected? Who is still being protected?
So I ask you, President Trump and members of Congress, why do we continue to cover up sexual abuse and assault? Who are we covering for?
And to be clear, the only motive for opposing this bill would be to conceal wrongdoing. You have a choice. Stand with the truth or with the lies that have protected predators for decades.
Donald Trump and his administration have made that choice. The White House says that supporting the bill that would trigger the release of the Epstein files would be viewed by them as, quote, a very hostile act to the Trump administration. And here's what Donald Trump said in the Oval Office about the Epstein case just moments after the survivors finished speaking.
So this is a Democrat hoax that never ends. It reminds me a little of the Kennedy situation. We gave him everything over and over again, more and more and more, and nobody's ever satisfied. And I think it's enough, because I think we should talk about the greatness of our country and the success that we're having.
Just unreal, just unbelievable. And he kind of gives the game away there, where he's like, I want to be talking about, he's almost giving away, projecting his own strategy, saying that by talking about the Epstein files, the public and critics are trying to deflect from his successes, when in reality, he's trying to do things to deflect from the Epstein files.
Exactly right. And it's, the narcissism is so intense. Like, we should be talking about how great I am. That's really, he really means it. Like,
yeah,
we should be talking about how great I am. And one of those women, I think the clip came out a little bit later saying, we can get the list together ourselves. We all know who Epstein's clients were, his friends were. We'll put that list together if Congress won't do it. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I'm agreeing with, said that she would take that list and read the names out loud in the halls of Congress. They're 2 votes short away from that special.
We'll see. That's also, number one, I'm just still shook by Marjorie Taylor Greene herself, like, being on the right side of this issue. Number 2, the fact that they would compile a list themselves. I know that one of them jumped in and was like, "Oh, we might do it if we're promised, like, if this is like in a prosecutorial sense." So we'll see what they end up doing, but it's just that discharge petition. you said, right, they're 2 votes away.
Two.
They need 2 more Republicans. I mean, who do you think that's something that could happen?
It seems like they could peel 2, couldn't they?
Maybe some swing state, blue state Republicans, maybe.
Yeah,
Mike Lawler, maybe.
Yeah, Lawler, although he never really comes through.
No, he does not. But like, again, it's just been so ridiculous the way that they've been handling this and the way they concealed it. And we were talking a little bit about this, just about, what could be in there about Trump that's making him behave this way. And, that weird moment a month or so ago where he was talking about how his falling out with Epstein was about girls being stolen from Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
And he was asked about Virginia Giuffre, and then he kept saying plural.
Yeah.
So it's like, who else was taken from Mar-a-Lago? If he himself, unsolicited, said this, there must be others. Maybe that's what's in the files. I don't know, but all I know is he's acting like he has something to hide.
Listen, I can't imagine Trump years ago, before he's in public life, not taking Epstein up on having a little bit of fun, as he would think of it. I can't imagine.
I don't think Trump's ever been a person of integrity to be like, what, I think this is, I won't indulge in this thing if it's right in front of me, right? So
exactly.
I don't know whether there was underage, women maybe or girls. I don't know what exactly happened there, but if you've had a decades-long friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, I mean, and you guys are like buddies in that birthday card. Remember the weird birthday card thing that he wrote him, and they said they shared wonderful secrets or something. I have never written to a friend on a birthday card or otherwise like we share wonderful secrets. So I think that's sketchy, and it's also sketchy to have wonderful secrets with that guy in particular. So
in the caricature of a naked woman,
signature in a weird place on the card. If you guys haven't seen it yet, go look it up. Really weird stuff there, but there's something going on here. There's very real victims here that deserve justice. They're doing the weird machinery with moving Maxwell around in exchange for her telling Todd Blanche that Trump did nothing wrong. So,
nothing that would make her worry, she said, which is a really low bar.
Right? Yeah. If that's the bar, then yeah.
Well, Michael Wolff made the argument, and I never know really to believe Michael Wolff, but he's really cool in his way. But he heard it was Maxwell's people who released that card. And it was a message to Trump to take care of her. And it was soon after that we have Todd Blanche going down there, and then she's moved to the spa prison.
Yeah, because I read it was Epstein's estate, which I guess could maybe have ties to her. But again, I don't know for sure. There's a lot of different reporting out there, but it's like either way, that was a whole weird. The moment that the Todd Blanche meeting was happening, it was very clear that something was cooking.
And how? So it never happened before. And then she's moved and everything's fine. And they released the transcript of that meeting, right?
Yeah.
No, this is, look, if you are afraid of Trump's power, you really want him to keep doing this. Because this is bad for him. The longer this goes on, the worse it is. But these women really need their day.
Yeah.
They just do. It's so overdue. It's insane. And what's wonderful to watch is that they were all isolated before. And they were threatened. And I know people who wonder about Virginia Giuffre's suicide and whether that was really a suicide. No one ever talks about the details of it. But these women said they were threatened. There's a woman talking about her young daughter being threatened. And now they are all in touch with each other. That's the brilliance of this.
Yes. And that's what they deserve. That's what they've needed for a long time. When you're a survivor of what they've been through, You need the camaraderie just for their own mental health and own well-being. And also now they can move in a block and push for justice in more profound ways. That press conference was really powerful, and it got attention. And Trump was doing flyovers during it. You know, like, I don't know if that was coordinated. He had the Polish president there, but either way, you couldn't really distract from it, and it grabbed everyone's attention. And I think that's what we need, is to be able to push for justice. And I think some Republicans are moving. You see Marjorie Taylor Greene, some of the more, that's what it's going to take for there to be the files to be released. It'll be for Republicans to compel it via Congress. We'd have to wait until Democrats, got into power in 2026 or otherwise. But yeah, it's good to see them out there speaking out and telling their stories. And some of them are like, I'm a Republican. They're like, I voted, they're saying that they voted for Trump and that they're disappointed in the way he's behaving, and they don't like that he's calling it a hoax. I mean, that's the least that they could say in that aspect. But I think he's got to, I don't know if he'll move on it. We'll see, because it's the obvious politically expedient thing for him to do. So the fact that he's not, again, hiding something.
He doesn't take advice. And especially not this time around. He really believes that anything he says is brilliant and genius and has to be followed. But boy, the behind doors testimony with Mike Johnson, where Nancy Mace came out weeping and later said she was having a panic attack. And Nancy Mace is, I think, psychologically very fragile, but understandably, to hear those stories, and she was a victim of rape herself. You think that would move another 2 votes?
You would think, but we're not in. The only thing that moves these people is self-interest and power, and we're not in a place where they're moved by displays of empathy and displays of emotion and decency. So I think it's going to have to be raw political calculation that moves some of these other Republicans to vote.
And that warning shot from the White House, we will consider this hostile if you sign on this vote.
And also, it's just absurd what is permissible by this. Imagine if Biden had sent that, or any Democrat, that one threat would consume the news cycle for weeks. It's just the amount of authoritarianism that's coming out of this admin is absurd.
It really is. And there's everyone's sort of sleepwalking in Congress. It feels that way to me. Like
they're thinking, they're thinking they can just maximize on his delusions for their own personal gain and ride this out. But people don't understand when republics, are under pressure, no one wins in the end. You can try to grab your scraps throughout, but no one wins, and that's why more people should wake up. But at least the judiciary is being parts of the judiciary, the lower courts, are trying to be a check where Congress won't.
Nice segue.
I'm working on it.
So and I were thinking about what happened this week with the appeals court. The appeals court has pushed back on Trump in 2 really massive ways. The first is on deportation. Let me read this to you. This is from the New York Times. Appeals court blocks Trump's use of Alien Enemies Act to deport Venezuelans. The case appears set to return to the Supreme Court in a decisive battle over Trump's use of the 18th century law to deport migrants. And I think our viewers know that Trump has been using obscure and old statutes in order to declare emergencies and then take emergency powers. And one of them was to take the Alien Enemies Act, which really talks about giving the president extra powers in case of an invasion by another country. Okay, not people crossing the border illegally looking for work. So let's go on direct to that next page. A federal appeals court late Tuesday rejected President Trump's attempts to use an 18th century wartime law to deport immigrants he has accused of belonging to a violent Venezuelan street gang. The decision by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit in New Orleans was the first time that federal appellate judges had weighed in on the substantive question of whether Mr. Trump had properly invoked the law, the Alien Enemies Act, as part of his aggressive deportation agenda. While the ruling by a divided three-judge panel of one of the most conservative courts in the country was a defeat for the administration, the issue is still likely to be heard by the Supreme Court. Mr. Trump had made the Alien Enemies Act, which had passed in 1798, the centerpiece of his earliest efforts to summarily deport a group of Venezuelan immigrants he claimed were members of the street gang Tren de Agua. In March, he issued a presidential proclamation that drew on the law's sweeping powers to round up and expel members of a hostile nation in times of declared war or during an invasion or predatory incursion. But the appellate panel, in a 2-1 decision, rejected his assertions that the American homeland was in fact under invasion by Tren de Aragua, rebuffing the idea that immigration, even at a large scale, was synonymous with a military breach of U.S. borders. Quote, a country is encouraging its residents and citizens to enter this country illegally is not the modern day equivalent of sending an armed, organized force to occupy, to disrupt, or to otherwise harm the United States, Judge Leslie H. Southwick wrote for the panel's majority. There is no finding that this mass immigration was an armed, organized force or forces. That finding could have legal and political implications, given that Mr. Trump has used claims that immigrants are invading the United States, not only to justify his use of extraordinary laws like the Alien Enemies Act, but also to devise a broader anti-immigration narrative. The Fifth Circuit's ruling was the latest example of federal courts questioning the president's basic version of reality and pushing back on his attempts to effectively manufacture crises as a way to grab more power.
That's a big loss for Trump. Big loss for Trump right there. And I wrote an article about this today and tied it together to some of his other issues and his other big major court losses. But the core of this is that this court, as well as the other rulings we're going to talk about in a second, strike down his fabrication of emergencies. He's been manufacturing these crises, whether it's immigration, whether it's the tariffs, whether it's for the troop deployment. And he is doing this lying, frankly, saying, I'm going to exert this emergency power from this old obscure law to justify me bypassing Congress in the case of the tariffs, or me just eroding due process rights and sending just random innocent immigrants to CCOT in El Salvador. And the court is saying unmistakably, this is illegal.
And we just saw a judge last week stop the White House from sending these children back to Guatemala, where they would have faced, unspeakable horrors.
I know.
And the judge, she was so great. She got, I think, the administration prosecutor to repeat after her, do not let the plane leave the ground. But, isn't it something that in our system, Ahmed, that it's taken this long to challenge these assumptions?
And that's the problem. It's the slow, when you have Trump with his flood the zone strategy, the way he's moving, there's so many statutes he's violating simultaneously that it's hard for the court system to keep up, and the judiciary can move slow. And the appellate system, you have a lower court ruling, then the appeal goes, and there's time for that. Then it goes up to SCOTUS. So really, he can bulldoze for a long time in a lot of different areas until he's proportionally stopped. Some of these rulings did outright stop, like this Alien Enemies Act. This ruling said no, like you're blocked, right? And the tariff one, they didn't block it. They said they kept the tariffs in place until he appeals to the Supreme Court. But nonetheless, I just had to talk about, like, for just a quick moment, the profound nature of these rulings and the fact that the judges, the terms they used and just how forcefully they said this is unlawful. And we'll get to the others, the specificity of the other rulings in a second, but it's just overall, it's a really strong clapback to the administration. And although we'll see what happens with SCOTUS, it's a W for this week.
It is for sure. But don't you think I'm thinking of how the appeals court pushed back on presidential immunity so forcefully?
Yeah.
It was a unanimous decision. They were excoriating the people arguing on Trump's behalf. And then the Supreme Court just said, no, actually.
Yeah. And that's the worry here, right? I mean, when we look at the different cases, this Alien Enemies Act ruling, I think this one, hopefully, they would likely uphold, given with the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case.
Yes.
The way they ruled there kind of seems like they care a little bit about due process, maybe. So we'll see. I mean, that's one I'm a little bit more hopeful on. The tariff case and the emergency powers, with that, they might try to say, they've been really pushing the unitary executive theory in the different rulings. So I think that might be one. Maybe they rule in Trump's favor. It's pretty cut and dry that's illegal, right? You can't that ruling too in LA saying there was no rebellion, right? Because again, another fake manufactured crisis that he used to justify deployment of troops, that this could be a precedent also if he tried in Chicago and other areas as well. But again, it's just laying the strategy bare that this administration lies and creates fake crises to grab power, and the court just unmistakably said so.
Yeah, and this is how authoritarian rulers go from a democratic state to a tyranny, is they create, it's like the Reichstag fire. It's like, look at this, we have to get control.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Ahmed, would you like to read from the Times on the tariff decision?
Sure, yeah, I got it. So, Trump's sweeping tariffs invalidated by appeals court. The decision is a big blow to President Trump's trade policies, but the judges left the duties in place for now to allow time for a likely appeal to the Supreme Court. So, a federal appeals court ruled on Friday that many of President Trump's most punishing tariffs were illegal, delivering a major setback to Mr. Trump's agenda that may severely undercut his primary source of leverage in an expanding global trade war. The ruling from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit affirmed the lower court's initial finding that in May, Mr. Trump did not possess unlimited authority to impose taxes on nearly all imports to the United States, but the appellate judges delayed the enforcement of their order until mid-October, allowing the tariffs to remain in place so that the administration can appeal the case to the Supreme Court. And the adverse ruling will still cast doubt on the centerpiece of Mr. Trump's trade strategy, which relies on a 1970s law to impose sweeping duties on dozens of the country's trading partners with Mr. Trump, which Mr. Trump has harnessed the law, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, to raise revenue and to pressure other countries into brokering favorable deals. The law was typically reserved for sanctions and embargoes against other nations. So,
interesting.
Yeah. And again, it's interesting just on that front. He's been using tariffs like they're sanctions, in a really interesting way, just with no sense or consistency. But now this court is saying there was no economic emergency in the first place to justify these reckless tariffs.
But Trump is all about leverage. We quoted David Brooks on the show, who said, "Don't call Trump transactional. He's an extortionist." That's what it's all about. You make a deal with a transactionalist, you submit to an extortionist. And if you do, they'll come back and back and back for more. And that's really how he operates.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know. Just on that note, on the extortion, when it comes to if it was transactional, there'd actually be aims and goals. Like there's just not like what is the goal? You're going to box in China initially, and then you're going to use India to do it. But then you're like, you know what? Actually, India, I want to take credit for you having a ceasefire with Pakistan, and I want you to nominate me for a Nobel Peace Prize. This is apparently the start of their beef. The New York Times did an article, and he wanted Modi to nominate him, and Modi was like, "No, you had nothing to do with the ceasefire, bro." And then from there, he's suddenly like, "Oh, actually, I don't want you to buy Russian oil, 50% tariff, right?" And it's like the ego bruising, all the stuff happening there that's motivating these tariffs. There's no consistent economic strategy here to justify it, let alone an economic emergency.
Well, he's opening himself up to other people using his sense of self to extort him.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. They just know, oh, I just got to flatter him. Like most people think that that's the route, right? Flatter him. You hit him with praise and then you get what you want. He's really made, or which I think we're going to find out in the future, exactly how much of this is being done, or you buy into his crypto projects under the table, you know?
So much of that is being done. Billions of dollars and those meme coins. I mean,
God, we could do a whole episode on that alone, man.
You really could. You really could. So we had one more thing from the courts, and this has to do with a ruling about Trump cutting off Harvard funding. Judge rules Trump administration illegally canceled Harvard funding. The ruling was a victory for the university in its battle with President Trump, but the judge's decision may not be the final word. Harvard University won a crucial legal victory in its clash with the Trump administration on Wednesday when a federal judge said that the government had broken the law by freezing billions of dollars in research funds in the name of stamping out anti-Semitism. Like he really cares about anti-Semitism.
He does not care at all.
The ruling may not be the final word on the matter, but the decision by Judge Allison D. Burroughs of the U.S. District Court in Boston was an interim rebuff of the Trump administration's campaign to remake elite higher education by force. Harvard's case centered on its research funding, and the university contended that the administration had compromised its First Amendment and due process rights when it sought to strip it away. The judge's decision could give Harvard new leverage in its settlement talks with the White House. Although the ruling was a milestone for Harvard, the only university to sue over the administration's targeted assault on its research funding, President Trump had vowed to appeal any decision that went against him. His administration had spent months seeking to pressure Harvard in ways beyond research money. And while Judge Burroughs' ruling may not put an end to that campaign, her opinion was a bracing rebuke. We must fight against anti-Semitism, but we equally need to protect our rights, including our right to free speech, and neither goal should nor needs to be sacrificed on the altar of the other, Judge Burroughs wrote eloquently, I think, in an 84-page ruling. Harvard is concurrently, even if belatedly, taking steps it needs to combat anti-Semitism and seems willing to do even more if need be. She added, now it is the job of the courts to similarly step up, to act to safeguard academic freedom and freedom of speech as required by the Constitution, and to ensure that important research is not improperly subjected to arbitrary and procedurally infirm grant terminations, even if doing so risks the wrath of a government committed to its agenda, no matter the cost. As a part of the decision, Judge Burroughs said that the Trump administration could not issue new blockades on Harvard's federal research funding, quote, in retaliation for the exercise of its First Amendment rights or on any purported grounds of discrimination without compliance with the terms of the civil rights law. The White House condemned the ruling.
It was a great ruling. And she was really unmistakable in her language. You know, she said that the White House used anti-Semitism as a smokescreen to target, you know, to retaliate and pursue their ideological aims. And it was, again, these judges are right. They're writing some fire in these rulings, and it's really telling the truth.
And you know, Michael Wolff, really a journalist who wrote a book about Trump. He actually had access to Trump in the first term, and you know, he's known for being kind of gossipy too. But I really appreciate him. He's been making Instagram spots, but he did this one, which seems to me believable, but also might give us an insight into Trump's psychological response to these, what I would call narcissistic wounds. In other words, he's not going to take it professionally like, well, you know, I took these actions on tariffs for the people, and if the courts don't think it's right, okay, I'll readjust, I'll do something else. No. He takes it as an insult, as a wound. Mm-hmm. And this is how Michael Wolff describes what he's hearing.
On Friday, the Federal Appeals Court ruled against Trump's unilateral power to set tariffs. Immediately, as soon as the ruling came down in the White House, this was one of those uh-oh moments, bad weather. Everybody knew things were about to get weird. Steve Bannon used to call it flip out time. What happens here is that you can't say no to Trump. As soon as you do that, as soon as that happens, he goes into a rage, a serious anger management, weird moment happens. The idea that there are checks and balances, that notion of government he doesn't exist in. He can't accept. I'm not even sure that he understands. This immediately becomes a personal attack, and he responds personally. He goes to war, and he insists everyone around him join him in that war. He needs to undo, he needs to punish, he needs to triumph, he needs to strike back in every possible way. Applying Congress is not much of a defense here, and I'm not sure the courts are able to offer much of one either, not with his constant levels of intimidation and willingness to defy them. That leaves us, the electorate, and we can only wait now to see how much he will interfere with our ability to say no to him.
Sounds accurate to me. I mean, this is how he operates. He can't handle his authoritarian worldview being challenged at all.
Yeah, it speaks to a kind of fragility, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. It's, you know, it's a kind of, you know, you can't take a joke on steroids. You know, any loss means he's raging around the White House. He's saying crazy things, and no one is allowed to object to him.
He can't, and that's what, again, all of this behaviors that we discussed earlier with the, you know, the authoritarian raging, the troop deployments to DC, the fake projections of strength, the emergency declarations, it's all coming to fill that void, right? If we want to get, you know, that's what the show's about. We want to get psychological, you know, it's coming from a place of just deep narcissistic void and pain, right? And then he gets these losses, endless court losses piling on top of it now. He's already underwater. No matter what he can do, he can't make himself be loved, which is really one of the things he wants deep down more than anything, is he wants to be loved. So he sees his poll numbers, and because he's so limited in his worldview, he can't like ascertain that the country doesn't love what he's doing because he's literally gaslit himself. That's the thing people sometimes need to recognize. He's not just lying to the public, he's lying to himself in real time.
Yeah, no,
right?
he really convinced himself that he had won the 2020 election. I think he knew at first it wasn't true, but he believes his own lies, and as we saw with Carolyn Levitt in that saying that he was historically popular. Is it they can just say that the polls are wrong, they can just say the courts are wrong, and that everything's fine. And but I'm looking forward to seeing if Wolf can give us a little bit more inside scoop on what's really going on when Trump is angry, because he's so disturbed. You can barely see him holding it together on camera.
Yeah, no, he is visibly upset. I mean, and his administration's upset. The RFK hearing today, he was fuming. RFK was just angry. They're aggrieved, vindictive, angry people that are in charge of our government, that disdain the institutions they're supposed to uphold, and they're just wreaking havoc. They're pushing. They're just moving along with Project 2025, like we've discussed, and they're just being increasingly aggrieved. And you have Stephen Miller, just really unstable people that you wouldn't want in charge of a local McDonald's, that you have in charge of the White House, just pushing their mental instability and volatility on the world. Like we talked about that before. We're kind of living in the volatility of Donald's mind. Whatever he decides one day, he can't sit still. There was a couple weeks slow news cycle. He's like, oh, well, you know what? Today would be a good day to invade DC. It's like, just relax for a week. Give us a week, but he can't sit still because he's miserable. He's just miserable.
And he's a master of the attention economy.
Yes.
So he's also great at it,
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, I try to talk about his brilliance at doing what he does. I don't think he's particularly smart about most things. He doesn't really read. I mean, it's all gut, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we wanted to talk about RFK and his relationship to expert data, expertise. And you've been making the argument that it's important for Trump to undermine authority in science, in policy, because that frees you up to do whatever you want.
Exactly. And this has been the argument that the conservative movement is making for a long time now. And it kind of culminated with the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025, where the scheme was, we're going to gut the bureaucracy of the experts. We're going to gut the government of these bureaucrats, the deep state, the administrative state that they think really runs the country.
Yes.
And to some extent they do, because they're the ones that keep everything running and afloat. And the expertise stays it's supposed to stay between administrations so that it doesn't crumble. But then Trump came into office. They purged, tens of thousands, over 100,000, or hundreds of thousands, actually, people, staffers, which, this, as a side note, added to the Black unemployment rate, because 18% of federal workers were Black. So that's one side note there. Project 2025 added to the Black unemployment rate. But they got the bureaucracy of these experts, and then now you want to target the independence within the bureaucracy, because those are the buffers to prevent the authoritarianism, the independence of the Fed, the independence of the CDC experts, the independence of public health officials, and the independence of, Lisa Cook as a Fed governor. Just all these little pockets. Just want to BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Oh, got it.
All these loyalists, and that's what this is all about. You want to undermine expertise, install these where the main qualification is loyalty above all else.
Yes.
Install them there and replace the experts.
And then you can say reality is whatever you say it is.
Doesn't work out well though for the countries that do that. Turkey undermine the central bank independence. Argentina did that.
Yeah.
Runaway inflation. Doesn't work out.
No, you can't control market forces by insisting they're irrelevant. They're still there.
Mm-hmm.
And The Soviet Union discovered that they didn't want to follow market indications because then they wouldn't be communist. So they would decide when people needed stuff. So there'd be no butter, but there'd be like, 3 stores worth of shoes.
Yeah.
Oh, it's terrific. So you have a tweet for us about RFK Jr. and his approach to gutting expertise.
This interview he did, I mean, obviously there's a hearing that just happened where there's a lot more things he said, but here, this interview, he gives a remark that really encapsulates all of what we just discussed.
My opinion, I always tell people, is irrelevant. People, we need to stop trusting the experts, right? We were told at the beginning of COVID, don't look at any data yourself. Don't do any investigation yourself. Just trust the experts. And trusting the experts is not a feature of science. It's not a feature of democracy. It's a feature of religion, and it's a feature of totalitarianism. In democracies, we have the obligation, and it's one of the burdens of citizenship, to do our own research and make our own determinations.
First off, everything about him, watching him just screams for me not to trust him. Like, you're talking about trust, and it's like he triggers every red flag in my soul whenever I hear him talk about anything. It's just like, dude, like, the brainworms are talking here. But basically, yes, that's the ball game. You want to not trust experts. You want to undermine public health, which is what he's doing now. He just has a really rabid conspiratorial view of public health that he's brought into the CDC, and he's just trying to inflict his view, basically justify his years of conspiracy theories now. And that don't trust the experts thing is it's anti-intellectualism, anti-vax, anti-expertise sentiment that's conquered the right for quite some time.
But and Ahmed, he says that if you trust the experts, that's going to lead to totalitarianism.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a twisted logic, isn't it?
It's absurd, and it's unbelievable how they flip it. They always, in the name of saving democracy, authoritarians are always like, oh, in the name of preserving democracy, right, we're doing these things, and you want to target the independent experts. How does that make any sense? Like, it's clear, I always wondered how much of this RFK genuinely believes, or if it's devious or nefarious. I think it's a little bit of both, because the way he apparently, Susan Monterez, the CDC director that was ousted, apparently was just refusing to sign on to. He was trying to get her to preemptively sign on to vaccine recommendations, and preemptively, and he's trying to do that. He's trying to put together this autism study that we know is just going to force some kind of link between immunization. Like, he's not here for the facts. And today in the hearing, he denied. Mark Warner cornered him, was like, will you acknowledge that 1 million Americans died of COVID? And he wouldn't acknowledge it, and was like, I don't have the data, and it's like, dude, you're the HHS secretary, and you won't acknowledge. And it's just this twisted fantasy world, like, that we have elected, that was so clear this is what they were going to do. And I'm just still dumb. Every time I see anything this administration does, I just something like get off my analysis hat and my journalism hat. And I'm just stunned by, like, the fact that Americans looked this in the face. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they were just in their own micro niche algorithmic universes, but they looked this in the face and voted for it. They knew RFK was part of the package that was advertised. They knew that this was coming, and it's just,
Ahmed, that exchange with Bill Cassidy or with Warner was even worse than you just said.
Yeah.
What he said was, "Do you know how many people died of COVID?" And RFK said he didn't know. And he said, "You're the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and you don't know how many people died?"
Yeah, and that thing right there is actually how the right has been trying to twist the death numbers. to say that people didn't die of COVID, they died of their underlying comorbidity. To try to like whitewash how COVID impacted the world. It has just been horrible that these people were empowered. It's objectively to watch RFK. Like, we should be in a golden age right now of like scientific breakthroughs and public health trust, and the amount of stuff America has been able to accomplish is wonderful. And the research funding, everything. And then now NIH gutted, everything gutted, and then RFK here, and then Bill Cassidy trying to play tough after the fact in his tough lines of questioning. Now, again, we have the midterms. I think Americans can see through this, but the fact that we're going through it it's not fun. But I think they're turning the country, hopefully waking them up to recognize, like, you got to pay attention when you're hitting the voting booth to make sure you know what you're potentially ushering in. And I think maybe we could come out of this stronger. You know, I mean, the previous appearances I'll offer in Hopium. I think the hope is that after this, people see the dark abyss of the American psyche that they let Trump exploit and are like, you know what? We don't want to do that again.
You know, I'm optimistic, as John Gartner likes to say, though, that's as long as we have a free and fair election. I do think it's a lot harder to rig individual state elections than it is perhaps a presidential one. But I'm hopeful. You know, we'll have to see. Meanwhile, after talking about Trump's disastrous experience over Epstein, he's also moving in on Chicago, and you brought in a nice, well, not nice, but you brought in a clip about Trump explaining why he was arresting people in D.C.
Yeah.
These are hardcore criminals. You know, we took many people off the streets of Washington, D.C. They're hardcore. They're not going to be good. In 10 years, in 20 years, in 2 years, they're going to be criminals. They were born to be criminals, frankly. They were born to be criminals, and they're tough and mean, and they'll cut your throat, and they won't even think about it the next day. They won't even remember that they did it. And we're not going to have those people. Washington, D.C. is now a safe zone. It's a safe place.
Oh, he just cleaned it up in a week or two, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. He went in there, and now it's a haven, and, you know, the military is there just high-fiving everybody, and it's a wonderful paradise now. Well, obviously, crime was already declining, 30-year low, down 26% from this time last year. But that statement that he made, we just have to be clear that he's talking about young Black kids.
Oh, yeah.
Because they were, the whole reasoning behind, like, people forget the Judge Jeanine Pirro presser, where she was talking about juvenile crime.
Oh, I remember.
They were going all on about juvenile crime. Everybody's talking about Black teens is basically was their enemy going into DC. And then to say these people are born to be criminals, just say it, Donald. Just say these young Black teens were born to be criminals. Like, we know what you're saying. We can see through it, right? So it's this racial profiling that he's been doing his whole life, Central Park 5. You know, we know his story. But that's what this whole thing is about. And the reason why I brought that clip in, because it's so emblematic of the whole strategy, because he only targets Blacks, you know, blue cities and blue states with Black mayors and declining crime, and tries to paint them, and majority, Black, majority in a lot of cases, citizenry. And he targets them and tries to profile them and now he's trying to pivot the midterm to be about that he's taking on these Black crime-ridden cities. And so that statement he made there, they're born to be criminals, is just so racist. It's just racist.
No, they're fundamentally, because of their genetics, they're criminals.
It's insane. And then it shows, it didn't get that much attention. I didn't see like many like chyrons or news articles covering it, because I guess we're just used to it. But it was one of his most overtly racist statements.
That's horrendous, isn't it? Well, here's a clip from Erin Burnett. I've really been celebrating her these days. I just think her show has a particular edge to it. And she really gets to the heart of things quickly. And here she is talking about he's been rumbling about invading Chicago, which means he's going to.
Trump versus Pritzker. So President Trump now warning that he has made up his mind and that he is going to deploy federal troops to the city of Chicago.
Chicago is a hellhole right now. We're going in. I didn't say when. We're going in. If the governor of Illinois would call me up, I would love to do it. Now, we're going to do it anyway. We have the right to do it.
Well, when it comes to that, minutes later, the Illinois governor, J.B. Pritzker, responded to Trump.
I can't live in a fantasy land where I pretend Trump is not tearing this country apart for personal greed and power. He has no idea what he's talking about. There is no emergency that warrants deployment of troops. He is insulting the people of Chicago by calling our home a hellhole. And anyone who takes his word at face value is insulting Chicagoans, too.
Pritzker also says he has reason to believe that the Trump administration has already begun staging the Texas National Guard for deployment to his state.
Yeah, I mean, they've since seemed to try to potentially walk it back a little bit. Like JD Vance was like, oh, no imminent plans to go to Chicago. You know, I think they maybe saw that the LA ruling was coming down, or they're trying to now make it maybe about ICE raids or something, not like troop deployments, because it's blatantly illegal. There's no grounds for it.
But there's no DC home rule.
There's no DC home rule in Chicago, but at the same time, they're still building up for it. Like I was on Fox News. I use the YouTube TV multi-view, so I've got like 4 networks on at the same time. And I basically see Fox News every hour. They have a different black person on that they're claiming is a resident, just a random Chicago resident, talking about this need. And every time I look them up, they are a right-wing activist that's like active in Republican politics. But they frame them as some like random black. So it's like trying to tell our audience like, hey, this is actually something that the black people in Chicago want. They want Trump to come, you know, and it's like so clear how they're the propaganda they're pushing in the Fox audience to try to justify this.
Yeah, it's just a street blood, you know. It's nobody.
Exactly.
Oh, so manipulative. It's awful. I'm glad they're walking it back a bit. It may be that they're worried about too much pushback.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. They might still do it. But all I know is overall is that it's a strategy. The bigger picture strategy is that he wants to pick this fight because he wants the midterms now be about crime, because he's lost ground on the economy in polling, immigration in polling, basically every other issue he was previously strong on. So he thinks crime, he's strong on crime. So if he can threaten to invade these blue cities, he can and Democrats push back on it, he can make Democrats look like they're pro-crime. That's the political strategy.
Oh, it's been around forever.
Yeah, he's not innovative.
I'm old enough to remember when Nixon was doing that with his vicious attorney general, George Mitchell. No, not George Mitchell. What's his name? I think it was Mitchell, but not George. In any case, I'm dating myself.
That must have been wild. I mean, I'm sure, you know, Trump makes Nixon look like Mr. Rogers, but at the same time, you know, being there during the Nixon administration, you know, especially first term, you probably saw so many echoes of Donald's abuses.
Yeah, no, it was actually terrifying, and it was amazing to watch Republicans in Congress investigate Watergate with real clarity and collaboration with the Democrats. This is a threat to our institutions, but that's a different generation. I mean, it's hard to believe, but it's 50 years ago. Anyway, all right. So our last bit here is really about Trump's health issues. There was even a meme right on the internet that Trump was dead. over the weekend.
Yeah. There's people just like guesstimating. Even Tim Walz chimed in on it. It was a lot.
And it is true that after he did his 3-hour self-love press conference, he was tired, and he does tend to kind of take weekends off when he's been doing too much. But it also followed these weird videos, right? We showed it last week that there's images of Trump hiding his right hand on camera where there's a huge bruise. And the White House was saying, well, he shakes hands with a lot of people. And then the bruises started showing up on the other hand.
That's
right, which is sort of odd. And meanwhile, there's talk of seeing his ankles swollen.
Oh, the cankle gate. Yeah.
which is really never a good sign. I worked as a social worker, not with a degree, but with a title, many years ago when I was a young man, and I used to do home visits to do assessments, and the first thing you do is you look at the ankles, because so many old people suffer from congestive heart failure, which basically means the heart can't pump blood sufficiently into the extremities, and also can't remove the water. So the water begins to gather. And this is the kind of thing we're seeing with Trump. I snagged this minute or two of an interview with Tom Nichols, who's always an interesting, I think, commentator, isn't he? Ahmed,
he has some interesting things to say. Yeah.
He was a mainstream Republican. He's now not one anymore. Mm-hmm. He has a working class background, so he hasn't lost touch with economic issues. And I find him sometimes interesting. So here he was with Tim Miller on the Bulwark talking about his recent attempt to understand Trump's health issues.
I'm not a doctor, but what I was going to say is I do know doctors, and I have been asking them. And, I feel like I'm doing that scene from A Streetcar Named Desire. I have a doctor friend downtown. But the doctors I know say, well, this is somebody who's having a lot, like a daily IV. Like this is the bruising you get from like regular IVs that have to be, that are doing a lot of damage. And one guy said to me, they're doing a lot of damage because they don't want to do it to both hands, because then you'd have to cover up. You're going to get bruises on both hands. So he's got that one hand that they're just using and covering up over and over again. I mean, the ankles. I guess those doctors said something about venous insufficiency. And I feel like I'm being Greg House. That's a diagnosis of exclusion, you idiots. But I mean the couple of guys that I reached out to just as friends, and they said, well, it looks like heart failure.
Yeah, been hearing a lot of that. I have a family member who has congestive heart failure too, and swollen ankles, right? I think, a lot of people are speculating something's going on with them. I mean, I think, especially with the hands, something's happening. I don't know what, but the admin is not being transparent about it. I remember when he had COVID in the 2020 debate, and he didn't tell Sol, tested positive, didn't tell Sol. And then, it wasn't until he was basically near hospitalization that we found out. I think if whatever's going on with him, the White House isn't going to freely tell us.
Well, he almost died of COVID. Yeah. He was in Walter Reed and almost died, and then wanted to have a Superman undershirt under his shirt to pop it because he's so narcissistic. Why is he getting daily intravenous medications? I mean, that's not the same thing as taking a pill for hypertension or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know, but he just hasn't been looking very well. So is that right? What?
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you. I mean, I don't know anyone who's getting intravenous medication regularly. And I know people in their 70s and 80s. That's just not a thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like he's getting IVs for hydration or something in his hand. That's not. I don't know what would be needed there. I think, again, this is another example of just the differences in coverage between Biden and Trump. If this was going on during the Biden admin and Biden had this on his hand, we'd be hearing about it from, first off, Fox News 24/7, but we'd also have some segments about it, more of them that we're seeing now on the CNN, for example, or MSNBC. But I just think it's because he presents as healthy to people, or like he presents as energetic. So it's less, they treat, the fact that he's pretty much about the same age as Biden. There's not that age issue there for some reason, but it's very clearly going to increasingly become one the longer this goes on and there's no clarity on his health.
It's an interesting thing. I think Americans equate illness with weakness. So if someone appears aggressive, like we just saw him, like they cut people's throats, they don't
yeah.
You come off like a tough guy, then how could you possibly be sick?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good observation.
Yeah, it was a very American kind of bias, I think.
Yeah, and I also think that's again, like we were talking earlier, like that's why there's not a lot of news cycles about how unpopular he is, because he projects strength. He's doing all these things, he's projecting strength. He's doing all these things and, pushing the bounds of power here and doing this. So therefore there must be some underlying strength there. And I think, again, it's all that psyop that he's trying to pull on the country to try to make us think he's stronger than he is. But he's not strong. He is a politically weak president, dragging his party down. Democrats are also unpopular in polling, but Republicans and Trump are doing so poorly that they're even less popular than Dems on the generic ballot. So again, the projections of strength, the projections of health, the projections of everything are not real depictions of reality. This is the guy who's a reality TV star first. That was the first thing he was actually really good at. That was like the first thing he was good at. Like the other stuff, he was not great at business, but he was great at reality TV and presenting false realities. And that's all that this is. The version of him we see on TV, he's an actor, man. He's performing.
Branding and marketing is his genius, isn't it? And but I was so disappointed when Bill Maher had dinner with him, not because, as people on the left would say, how could you have dinner with Donald Trump? It's not that. It's that Bill Maher came out afterwards and said, he was very rational and reasonable, and I don't know why he's that other guy on television. That's why Trump had dinner with him. So he would go out and say that. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. If he had come out afterwards and said Trump was being super reasonable and he's just baiting me. He wants me to come out and say that, and I won't. I think he's a corrupt monster. No one would have given Bill Maher any trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Trump presents. I hear he's likable in person. Charming. He'll charm you in person, and then afterwards he'll investigate you or do some creep. He's like, there's no reason to trust him. There's no, they like while we were recording, Lisa Cook, the DOJ issued criminal subpoena, for her record. So it's like anyone who appeases this guy, he smiles in your face one time, you're going to forget he's an authoritarian. Like, people got to get real. He's not reasonable. He's, someone who's very clearly playing you. And he's obviously equally easily manipulated himself, but that doesn't mean he doesn't know how to manipulate others.
And weaponizing the Department of Justice to investigate Lisa Cook because of some answer on a mortgage application.
And ProPublica just dropped a report showing that 3 other administration officials, I think we had, Sean Duffy was named in there. There's some others, 3 other officials who had the similar mortgage stuff. So it's like, they're not going to get investigated, but Letitia James and Lisa Cook and Adam Schiff and every Democrat, they're going to try to comb through everyone's mortgage records now. It's just, that alone would have been a presidency-ending scandal if we found out a president had ordered a cabinet official to look through people's mortgage records to find dirt on them. But again, just another day, I guess.
So Ahmed has been my guest co-host today, and it's been such a pleasure. But he's also our guest, so I thought I would take a few minutes just to ask him some questions and let him wax eloquently, if he likes, about some things. I guess my first question, Ahmed, is what has surprised you about Trump's administration since he came into power?
I mean, at first, the Elon Musk stuff surprised me a little bit because I thought they were going to be a little more methodical. I didn't think he would let Musk have as much shine as Musk had in the beginning. So that was one of the earlier surprises. I guess now it's just, it's maybe less surprise and more just, even though I knew a lot of this was going to happen, just kind of a shock that it's happening. Like we've been writing about Project 2025, as you know, since like 2023 and warning about what they were going to do exactly. But to see it play out and to see it like the total lack of moderating forces and like it actually being done in real time and the loyalty that surrounds him and that nothing like, the extent of the tariffs, maybe. So maybe his inability to be like, because the market was, the whole phrase, the markets are a check on him thing. I mean, I guess now the markets are up, but I guess one of the things that did surprise me is the degree of the business community that fully bended in the way that they like Tim. If you asked me if Tim Cook was going to give Trump a golden customized Apple commemorative item in the Oval Office last year, I would have been like, I don't think Timmy Cook would do that to us, because I always liked Tim Cook, and it's been disturbing to see the business community bend the way they have when a lot of the times they do not have to at all. That's been really disturbing for me. All the other stuff I kind of expected, the extent of it, from the immigration cruelty to the authoritarianism. But yeah, I'd say the business community really bending, and his, everything else is kind of just stuff that I knew was going to happen, unfortunately.
And knowing something's going to happen is very different than actually experiencing it, isn't it?
Yeah, when you see the president say he's going to come after the enemy within, and then he actually tries it, and there's these military on the streets of DC, it's shocking. It's just like you always hope that maybe there's something in there still in him that's human, I don't know if that'd be misconstrued, but like decency of some kind in there to, buffer him a little bit. But it's just, he is absolutely his worst self. That's, I guess, one of the things that I thought maybe winning the way he did, and like the popular, the popular vote at the time, everything will maybe validate him a little bit. Maybe he'd be a little bit, all he had to do was come into office and ride out in the Biden economy, cruise to 50% approval rating. He would have been fine. But he's acting like a lunatic. And that is not surprising, but the extent of it is a little shocking.
Well, he needs to denigrate everything Biden did, everything Obama did. It has to be denigrated. Doesn't matter what it is, whether he was supported or not. So he can't leave well enough alone, can he?
No.
Another question for you. These ICE agents, one thing we know is that they're going to surge an ICE presence in Chicago. That we know they're going to do. And that means raids in the way that they've been conducted, pulling people out of cars. What do you think the end point is this? This is really authoritarian stuff. This is like a secret police.
Yes, and I think that's the end point, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the judges, the one in the LA case, actually said that there's ongoing risk of unlawful overreach, and that Trump, because he's threatening these other cities, wants like a national police force, was what the judge said, which is what I think this culminates to, right? Turning ICE into his personal force. And Ezra Klein did a great episode a few days ago on the militarization of the police and Trump, this federalization of what he did in DC. It's about this. It's kind of like a paramilitary force. And that's what's concerning is that, and now with the recruitment stuff, that's what I'm really concerned about is they're increasing the salaries, they're giving signing bonuses,
$50,000,
and they're targeting young men. And there's all of these young men who are radicalized, who are lonely, who are incels, who are now going to be offered high-paying jobs to inflict their radicalization. Are we going to have like a Proud Boys to ICE pipeline here? That's what worries me most is what he's building there and what he could potentially direct ICE to do in the future. And the fact that he's building a group of people, the National Guard, good guys. Those are people who mobilize. Like I know people in the National Guard. Right?
Sure.
They're not gonna, they wouldn't do, they're the type of people if there was a kind of an order, some of that, the rank and file would be like, nah, But ICE, I think the end goal for him is to have a personal force of some kind.
Agrees. They were like brown shirts with masks. And the mask is the most dangerous part of it.
Yeah, it really is.
Anonymity, it wreaks violence, doesn't it? I mean, that's just what happens when no one knows who you are. You can do anything. Well, my last question for you: does Trump ever leave power? What happened?
Yeah, he leaves power. I think he leaves power. I don't think Donald Trump is going to be the thing that breaks American democracy. I don't think we should be embarrassed if he's the guy that does it, breaks this beautiful experiment down. I think he leaves office. I think he leaves in disgrace. I think he's going to leave with George W. Bush 2008 approval numbers. I think we're going to see him in the 20s. I think he's going to lose the midterms. I think he's cooked. I think we're not in Germany. We're not in a country where he can just federally rig an election. We're not in Russia. Like we have our state system, the state system that Republicans have through so many laws and court rulings upheld, right? They want those state rights. Well, now we've got them. And and now we're not going to let, the government, we're not going to let the federal government rig an election. So many of the battleground states are run by Democrats, the ones we need, because of that 2022 election, which was so important in hindsight now.
Yes.
We're in a position where even if you gerrymander your ass off, I don't know if I can cuss on here.
Sure.
Even if you gerrymander your ass off, I think low propensity voters are going to turn out in 2026 because the stuff Trump is doing is so on the nose. The military, it's stuff you can't deny, to the point that the criticisms of him and the party are going to land. And I think they're cooked in the midterms. And I think he leaves power in 2020. I think he tries this. He's probably going to try to stay, or he's going to do something. I don't expect it to be like easy, but I think he's going to leave in 2028. And I think a Democrat is going to have to clean this mess up again.
I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I wish I could know it for certain, but I agree that that's a likely trajectory. I spoke to an attorney I know today who said that he thinks Trump will leave office, but either by dying or being removed. Sort of an ominous sentence, and I'm letting it sink in.
I just think, we never know. We don't really know what's going to happen, but I choose to be optimistic because it's in his interest for us to feel that he's an ever all-powerful force. He wants us to feel that. But this week with these court rulings proved, no, he's not. The laws exist. And I do think the Supreme Court will at least uphold a few of these rulings, maybe not all of them, but some of them are so on the nose, unlawful, that they're going to uphold some of them. And I just think, again, that shows he's not a king. He's being blocked. He's abiding. He's defied some court rulings, but he's abiding by others. And I think, again, most authoritarian. I think if you look at the history, most authoritarian countries need popular mandates initially to establish the authoritarianism. In a lot of cases, you can't really build a lasting authoritarian regime with this level of unpopularity. If he was at 50 or 60% approval, I would be significantly more afraid. I would be shook because because then the people have greenlit it and it's going to happen. But he is so universally, almost nearly universally among the people who are paying attention and independent-minded, reviled, that I think we're going to push back. I have faith, and hopefully we can wake up November 2026 and we can have another episode, and we can toast champagne and talk about how we're right. But I think that's the beginning of the end for him. He'll be a lame duck once Democrats take back the House, and I don't see a way, especially with the Obamacare subsidies about to expire.
Exactly.
Like that's like one of the main things, like Medicaid too, but the Obamacare subsidies, I was on Obamacare. I'm an entrepreneur. I was on Obama. I am, like this is going to affect everyday people, everybody, who doesn't. So again, maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I do think that not the system will hold, but the people will hold.
Well, Ahmed, if you're right, we'll have you on the week after the November midterms, and we'll have champagne.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I'll have apple cider. I quit drinking, so I'll be slurping on some Coca-Cola or some apple cider. But we'll be turning up.
Sparkling something.
Sparkling something. I will toast, because I don't mean we're in the right timeline. That means we're going to be okay.
All right. I'm counting on that.
Yeah.
So, Ahmed, I don't know if you know what time it is, but it's time for shrink wrap. And usually John asks me the question, but I'm going to throw it to you. What did we learn today?
We learned that, I don't know if we literally learned it, but we relearned, that Trump is not well, and that Trump is acting out of fear because he feels cornered. And he is politically weak. And that is the bottom line. And he is acting and moving in a place of fear. And if you feel afraid right now, just know that Donald is more afraid than you are, because that's how he's behaving. Or at least that's what I think we learned.
I agree with you. I think we are learning and relearning. And we're relearning because he has a way of shaking the Etch-a-Sketch. There's this way. Bill Clinton had this too. Clinton would be getting into trouble, and then he'd kind of show up and he'd smile and you'd forget. And Trump kind of shows up and says something aggressive, and the press forgets, and the Republicans in Congress forget. But we haven't forgotten.
Nope.
We know that he's losing ground terribly. We know that he's losing ground cognitively. There's a kind of race to see, does he lose power before he becomes cognitively disorganized? We'll have to see what happens. And that's why my friend had suggested that, he might be removed from office, because if he continues to deteriorate, there may be a point where he won't be able to serve at all, but we'll have to see.
We'll have to see. But I think overall, he's operating like a man who's cornered and who has something to hide and who's worried terribly about something and many things. Many of them we know about, some of them maybe we don't. But I know that a confident, happy president who thought that they were on top of things would not be behaving this way.
Yeah. He shouldn't have become friends with Jeffrey Epstein, man. It just was a bad idea.
Yeah, who could have predicted that was a bad idea, other than his weird, not great instincts. This is the guy whose mentor was Roy Cohn. So, not the best character judge there.
And how? So, John has been on assignment, on an undercover assignment this week, and we were hoping to hear from him Hey, Rex, any word from John? John, so glad you called in. What our audience doesn't know is that you've been on an undercover assignment documenting the conditions of alligator Alcatraz in Florida and the way they're mistreating immigrants arrested by ICE. But we haven't heard back from you. Tell us, is it as bad as it sounds?
Well, actually, I don't really know because I was only there for an hour or so.
Really?
Well, I came with a fake ID saying I was a migrant worker from Guatemala, and I was picked up at Home Depot last Monday along with a group of other day workers. I was handcuffed, roughed up by ICE agents who told me that it would be worse if I were a Jew. Anyway, when I was being processed at Alligator Alcatraz, they did a facial search on the web, and it turns out there's another John Gartner.
Oh, okay, that seems reasonable, but why does that matter?
Well, it turns out this other John Gartner was a close friend of Jeffrey Epstein's, and he's all over the files. Pam Bondi actually called me to apologize, and so I was sent to Texas to serve time with Epstein-Maxwell. I'm calling from the prison phone, or, well, the camp phone as we call it right now. Hey, I'll be off the phone in a minute.
Wait, you're in prison with Epstein-Maxwell? You're kidding.
No, I'm not. We're pickleball partners.
I'm sure you are.
Really, she's got a great forehand. But seriously, folks, she's the nicest child trafficker I've ever met.
Did you tell them who you really are?
Not yet. Why go home when I can hang out at this spa for a while? I'm getting good at Pilates.
Well, Ahmed's been a great co-host, but come back as soon as you can. We miss you.
Sure, but I've got to finish working on my tan first, and then I'll be on my way.
I think, he just has to tell Todd Blanche that Trump was innocent and he'll get out. But I didn't know that there was a podcast. I mean, it kind of makes sense that there's a podcast studio in the prison because it is a high-end prison, right?
Yeah, a lot of influencers are in there for sure. Well, Ahmed, it's been such a pleasure. Thanks so much for filling in for John and for sharing your views with us, as always.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be the first guest host here and for you to, ask me to do this. I appreciate you having me, and thank you, to all your viewers for always being so kind every time I pop on. So great talking to you as always, man.
All right. You be well and say hi to your lovely wife for us, okay?
Thank you. I will.
All right. And we'll see you next week on Shrinking Trump, folks. Thanks for being with us.